So how are you today, Josh?
I'm okay.
Yeah? How was your Passover?
That's right. This is what is it? Like one of the most important Jewish holidays, right?
It is one of the three holidays where people used to walk to the temple, whatever the hell. They used to call it the one of the
Whatever the hell.
whatever the yeah, I'm not gonna get into that. I
It's
don't
an
remember
important
most
Jewish
of it.
holiday where
It's
we
an
remember
important
the
one.
the goal is to remember the our enslavement as a people and how we became free of that,
Yeah, our freedom.
but not just physically, but mentally.
Yes. Do you feel free?
Do I feel free? I think I feel freer than those people who were enslaved back in Egypt.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's all relative, right?
It's true. It is all relative. It's always at spring too here. Do you remember spring here?
No, what's that?
Oh, it's so this thing happens. First, all the leaves and all the plants kind of die.
What?
They die for a while, and everything's all like woo and snowy and meh.
What? The weather changes where you are? That's crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
So it's not nice and sunny and warm all the time.
It is almost never nice and sunny and warm.
What?
I know. One of the things that happens around Passover is also it's springtime, which is why, on the little seder plate, there's a little green thing to remind you that it is spring. This is my very clumsy way of trying to lead us into our topic.
I should say this. I led a Passover Seder last night
Oh, wow.
with my housemates.
Cool.
Yeah, I brought my girlfriend over, and there was another former housemate who's Jewish came. So we kind of sort of did it together.
That's cool.
I realized, as much as we talked about leaders and followers last
Yeah.
week, I don't think I'm the best leader when it comes to like a Passover Seder. We said we're all good at leading in certain things, and
Different things. You don't feel qualified for
I
that?
feel like I'd rather follow the Passover Seder. I feel like everyone's looking to me to explain Passover, especially when there's people who have joined who don't know a ton about Passover. I'm like, oh yeah, why do we have the Seder plate? Well, let's look through the Haggadah, and oh, there's a did you know section. Let's read this.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like,
Together, even
together.
though I already know what it says, but I'm totally just going to share it with you.
That's
Yeah,
right.
that's how I teach sometimes. I'm like, well, you should be looking in your textbook, and I'm going to look in there too.
Yeah, but honestly, I think I might have forgotten. So I realized I forgot more details than I thought I would have.
Yeah.
There's a lot of details.
It's a lot of detail.
Yeah.
It
But
sure
the
is,
whole
yeah.
point is we want to remember all of the little, by really focusing on all the details and trying to make it tangible with all these physical items during the Seder. It's supposed to help, really not just like remember, but really like paint a picture and feel tangible, right? The memories. So that's why we've maintained these memories and traditions for what, millennia? So, and they've been pretty consistent.
That's such a good way of putting it because it's like it's a very like some bits of it are very what's the word? Like tangible, visceral. But like I think my favorite, especially as a kid, was always the bowl of tears, so the salt water.
Oh, right.
So we dip something in salt water, and I love salt. I don't know if you remember that, but
I don't
I love
remember that
salt,
you
so
love
I'm always
salt.
happy to. You don't remember that I love salt?
No?
It was a thing. It was a thing in high school, at
Really?
least, that I used to have like those little packets of salt, and I would add them to
Oh.
everything. Maybe I imagine that people carry more than I.
Well, last night, I mean, I literally forgot the salt water until the Haggadah
Oh
said,
my
oh,
gosh.
now dip it in the salt water. I was like, oh, guys, we need salt water. That's how this Seder went, to give you an idea.
You just ran to the ocean, scooped up some salt water.
But we all had a great time singing, who knows, one? I know one. One is a sham, one is a sham, one is a sham.
That's enough. Okay.
Come on, Aya, finish it up.
In the heaven and the earth.
Ooh, ah, ooh, ah, ah.
I already reached my quota for singing.
Oh, no, the Taylor Swift last week wasn't enough for you?
That was more than enough. Yeah. We're still waiting to hear from her lawyers. Welcome back to Adulthood, friends. This is the discussion-based podcast where two former childhood acquaintances, now friends, discuss the things that, Josh, adverb?
Certainly.
Certainly matter.
Certainly matter. We haven't done that one before, right?
Certainly matter. I guess not. I guess we should probably start keeping track of that. Yeah.
Certainly is our adverb of the week.
Yes, certainly is our adverb of the week. And I'm Aya.
I'm Josh.
And welcome to episode 15.
15.
15. Yeah.
That's a big deal. Is it? It feels like a big deal.
It is a big deal. Yeah. Feels like a big deal. And we're doing kind of a more intense topic to not celebrate, but whatever the
Let's
sad
yeah.
version of celebrating is. Let's
let's
celebrate
let's
this
sad
with
celebrate episode 15 by talking about some deep,
some deep, dark
heavy
corners of our minds.
material.
Yes. And today our topic is trauma.
Trauma,
So,
not drama, but
yeah,
trauma.
not drama,
No,
trauma.
sometimes there's some drama involved in trauma, but that's
Yeah, or some trauma involved in drama.
ooh,
But
that is true.
oh, isn't it? Yeah. So, kind of the nature and origin of trauma in our own lives. And does it ever go away for us? And I'd like to say right from the start that neither of us is qualified in any psychological sense to speak of,
Meaning we're not
like,
we're
to,
not trauma expert. We're not like, this is not our job. We're
yes.
just but that's this podcast. We just talk
Yeah,
about important stuff, whether or not we should be.
exactly. Discussion based. That's that. And we're talking about personal experience and things like that. And,
Yeah.
maybe what we've read in a book is the extent of our expertise.
Are you saying basically you just want to get at in case we are accidentally insensitive?
Yep.
Because yeah, I guess there could be.
In
Should we do like
case,
a little
yeah.
trigger content warning here? Because it could be talking about some
Oh,
stuff
yeah.
that could be,
That's a good idea too. Yeah.
well, literally could bring back some traumatic memories.
Yeah. It could trigger some things. So, yeah. And I kind of just wanted to say that as well, because I don't know who's clicking on this. And I just want you guys to know neither of us is a counselor or trauma specialist.
Trauma specialist.
Except for maybe,
No.
I don't know if that exists or.
You're a drama specialist, but not a trauma specialist.
Right.
I got to stop with this terrible joke.
I'm neither.
This is so bad. I don't know why.
But you might be a drama specialist. I don't know why either, but I think we're just.
You're all about that drama.
I think.
Aya, right?
I'm just like, I am so into the drama that I just like, I can't not bring it up all the time.
God, so much drama.
So much drama. Should we get into it?
Yeah, let's get into it.
Okay. And we're back. So Josh.
Yes, Aya?
You've told me before that this time of year reminds you of something. Do you feel like talking about that a little bit to us?
Yes, that's such a nice way of introing this.
Was it? I don't know how to do it.
You're good with the segues.
Thanks. That wasn't really it.
You're the segue queen.
That's my hope one day, to be a segue queen.
Yeah. All right. Well, Dr. Ishai. And I think I should call you Dr. Ishai this episode because I feel like I feel like I'll be talking to a therapist. This is what it's gonna feel like.
Is this you calling into today on our radio show we've got Mr. Joshua Littman calling in. Joshua, are you there? Are you there, Mr. Littman?
Hello? Hi.
Hi. Yeah, hi, welcome to the show.
Oh, hi. I just wanted to say I'm a real fan of Adulthood, friends.
Oh, I'm so happy to hear that. Thanks. Thank you.
I'm really a big fan of Dr. Ayala Ishai.
Oh, well, thank you. That's really wonderful.
She's got a great voice.
Okay, thank you.
I'm turning into Woody Allen, I think, as I talk here. I don't know.
And what were you calling in about today, Mr. Littman?
Oh.
Am I saying that correctly?
It's really good emphasis on the man. I appreciate that. Littman. I guess I just wanted to share with you a whole bunch of traumatic experiences.
Okay, yeah. Well, that's what we're here for today.
Oh, wonderful.
That's what we're here for today,
wonderful.
Joshua. Yeah.
Look, you really are about the drama. Look at this. But more like
we are about the
drama, like high school drama.
High school drama,
like the class.
I'm not sure what you're referring to, sir, but that's okay. Do you wanna start with
really keeping character here? That's really, I like it.
Oh, I'm still not sure what you're talking about, but that's okay. Do you feel that we're in some sort of other show right now? Do you feel that we're in some podcast? It seems like you think we're somewhere other than where we are right now. So you've called into the show.
Yeah, I'm a little confused. I have to admit. It's true. Yeah, so okay. Hopefully you can help me. Doctor.
Okay, yeah. Well, what's on your mind?
What kind of doctor are you again?
It's better not to
Doctor
know.
of what? What is it?
I'm a doctor of philosophy.
It's exactly what I was looking for. Perfect.
Oh, good.
I think that's the only person who can help me today.
Okay.
Just keep running with this.
All right. Should we stop like 10 minutes ago?
No, we definitely have to get the fun out of the way now because.
Do you feel better if we go into that space of things not actually
it's okay. So
being real?
I'll get back to your question, which I guess, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, Passover we've talked about that at the beginning. And I guess it's no coincidence that Well, okay. So the truth is, the first night of Passover is actually a little bit of a, well, Passover itself brings back some traumatic memories for me because my mother died on the first night of Passover. So it's true, whenever actually this holiday comes around, all those memories kind of come back. And I just get this feeling like it's already kind of like the holiday is already about like, you know, we were enslaved and we have to remember the bitterness of slavery by
Yeah.
eating this thing. And it's weirdly apt. I don't know. So sometimes I can't tell if it's just a holiday that feels this way or I feel especially this way because of what happened. But yeah, it's, I guess, given this time of year, it maybe is a good time to reflect on this experience and trauma in general.
Yeah. Yeah, when you were talking about the I mean, I've heard us obviously I know what Passover is and how we're remembering the enslavement, but I only only while we were doing the intro did I actually make that connection
Mm.
that, you had probably felt like you were suddenly, well, I guess I'll let you get into that, but
It's an interesting thing about holidays in general, but Jewish holidays. There's some really strong themes there, and it's so strong. I actually have taken. I guess we'll probably get into my story, but I've taken that and I've actually put it into a script.
mm,
That means it's not like an autobiographical script. It's inspired by the events that happened in my life. But I've worked
right.
Passover into the script as well, and the themes of Passover
Oh,
and the way
okay.
they relate, which is very interesting.
Oh, wow, that's cool. That's the snow falling on tulips, which you
It's
mentioned.
called When Snow Falls on Tulips, and I guess we'll
Oh, sorry, when snow falls
yeah,
on
no, it's
tulips. Okay.
and I guess we'll get into why it's called that because there's a very specific reason.
Okay.
I don't even know if I've told you the full story before.
Like you have mentioned on the podcast before, your mom passing away when you were
Mhm.
16, I think it was. And I honestly, I mean, as good friends as we are now, I've never heard the entire story.
Oh,
And I mean, I don't want to say I'm looking forward to hearing it
it's
because
exciting. It's
I'm,
filled with
I
twists
really,
and turns.
but I think I am interested in hearing about it because I think this shaped a lot of, it must have affected you quite a bit.
Mhm.
And, those kinds of things are always of interest, especially to the people closer to you. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I've been wanting to hear this story, and we kind of mentioned that we would talk about it with trauma.
No, the truth is oftentimes sharing, like anybody, like any friends, when you share stories like this and you dive in deep with people's past and their trauma, you get closer.
Yeah.
So I hope everybody prepares to get real close to me.
Yeah. You're
We're
about to
about to
go
get
real
real close.
you're about to get close with another 50 to 100 people.
A lot of people, stuff like this, they can't talk about very easily, and other people they can. It
Yeah.
depends. I don't have it. I've talked a little bit. I mean, we had the mortality episode where Pierce came on, and
Mm,
I feel that was more his story. But there was a little bit there that I remember saying to relate, and talking about how experiences like that can help bring about a certain self awareness.
yeah.
But yeah, okay, so yeah, well, we can dive into it. And if you have any questions, just like interrupt me at any time because I.
I'll just raise
Oh
my
yeah, what's
hand.
that? Is
I
that a
have two
question? Do you have a
questions,
question?
mister.
You have
I
multiple
have three
questions?
questions. I have multiple questions. Yeah, I already have some questions, but I kind of want to give you a chance to start. I know you're usually pretty comfortable
Okay, well.
talking, so I shouldn't say that. I'm gonna try to be less of a jerk to you this, or should I be meaner to kind of?
It's true. You know what the great thing is, when you talk about your trauma, everybody's so much nicer to you.
Everybody's real nice all of a
Crazy.
sudden. Yeah,
All right, so let's get it.
I'll try to be as mean as possible
Yeah,
then.
be
Okay.
extra mean to be different. Okay, so I guess we started with Passover. So the truth is, yeah, the very first night of
Yeah.
Passover. So let's see. Let's flash back here. It was 2005. I was 16 years old, living at home with I have two younger brothers, Daniel and Alex. Daniel was 14 at the time, and Alex was turning 13 soon. So he was going to have his bar mitzvah that year. In fact, we were planning as a family to go to Israel to celebrate his bar mitzvah, if I recall correctly. And another important thing to mention was my grandmother. So my mother's mother had been living with us for many months. She had Alzheimer's. And so my mother and father made the choice to have her come live with us. That was at the time a bit of a struggle. I used to play cards with my grandmother all the time, and it got really hard to keep doing that with her. because she kept accusing me of cheating.
Oh, really?
And my mother would be like, just keep playing with her.
Mm.
But that anyway, that was something else we were dealing with at the time. And I might jump around in time a little bit here when telling this, but it was the first night of Passover. So I remember we had like a Passover meal, like a Seder, as we call it. So I was at the Seder with me, my brothers, my mother, and my grandmother. I remember my dad was also taking like a while to like join us because he was actually packing his bags to go on a work trip like the next morning.
Hmm.
And I'm pretty sure there was a lot of tension between my parents. They fought a lot, and my dad especially didn't care for like the the religious stuff. My mom actually really cared about following traditions and making that a part of our family. So anyway, she was very adamant about us doing the Seder. And the Seder went, it went well. I'm pretty sure, I think I was actually okay. I think my brother Daniel was like a little in trouble with my mother at the time for something. I don't know. Usually somebody was in trouble for something with her.
Oh, yeah. What did he do? Or
I
it
can't remember
just
what he
like,
did. I can't remember what it was, but I think he was
yeah.
grounded. I think he got grounded.
Uh-huh.
And
One of you usually
yeah,
was,
usually it was
right?
me.
Yeah.
I'm usually the one who got, actually he got grounded the least.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh,
Daniel, because I talked back. That was my thing. I remember from the last episode we talked
right.
about how I always
Yeah.
I just can't defer to authority. I have to question it all the time. My mom called it talking back.
Right. Yeah.
But anyway, I got really excited about the holidays. I loved when we got together to do this and sing all the songs. And I do remember asking this one weird question during the dinner because we would go around and have everybody read different things. And we get to my grandmother and she kept kind of like messing it up because of her Alzheimer's. Like it seemed kind of,
Mm.
and I remember asking my mother at the table, like, do you think maybe she shouldn't, I think it was her reading in Hebrew was sounding weird. And I was like, maybe she shouldn't read it in Hebrew or read it at all. Like, I don't remember what I asked, but she was like, she basically just said this at the table. She was like, just let her, because, she probably won't be with us next year.
Mm.
It sounds weird to say kind of at the table. My grandmother was pretty out of it. She didn't register a lot of stuff because
Yeah.
because of the dementia.
Yeah.
So cut to the end of the night, we had our Seder. We went to sleep. I remember actually saying goodnight to my mother. I came down.
Mm.
She was up usually very late. She was up into the night on the computer, and she was out on the couch. And
Okay.
I remember coming down to say goodnight to her. And it was actually, I remember it was a nice moment. Said goodnight, went to bed. I woke up. I think it must have been like 3 in the morning, 3 something in the morning, middle of the night, to a loud sound.
Mm.
I thought for some reason, I thought some like dishes or something fell downstairs. I thought something, so I kind of like jolted awake and I just kind of peeked. My door was ajar, so I could like see, I leaned forward in bed and I could see that someone was lying on the floor in our hallway upstairs. And just to give you a picture of our hallway, there was it's kind of a center area, and then there were different rooms around that center. So, my brothers each had rooms leading to that hallway, and my parents' room as well in the office. From what I understand, my mother was previously in the office on a computer.
Mm.
Anyway, I came out and it was her lying on the floor, face down. And, I obviously went up to her, kind of like shook her shoulder, and she didn't move. So I, of course, went and I got my dad, went to go wake him up. And I remember trying to wake up my dad. My dad, come out. He was like very tired, and he was just like, "Josh, what are you doing? Like, let me." I'm like, "No, you have to come out right now." Like mom's like, it was weird to say. Like, mom's on the floor, lying on the floor. She's
Yeah.
just on the floor. He's
Yeah.
like, "What?" He's like, "Whatever. Can we just talk in the morning?" Like, and I'm like,
Oh
"No,
no.
Dad, you have to." He's like really out of it, right? I really woke him up in the middle of his
Yeah. Yeah.
sleep and had to like convince him. He's like, "What? Oh, okay, hold on." And he got out of bed and came with me, and then it started to register, and together
Mm.
we turned her over because she was just lying.
Hmm.
And when we turned her over, to our relief, she came to.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she did. She came to. And interesting to note, there was like a little spot of blood on the carpet there because I guess when she fell, I guess she cut her lip, I think, and that left there was just this like blood on the carpet. Anyway, so she was there, but she was a little out of it, but we were relieved because we were like, oh, we thought something happened to her. And then
Hmm.
we started talking to her, but she was a little out of it. And I remember asking my dad, like, do you think I should call the ambulance? And he was like, I don't know. What do you think? I'm like, I don't know. What do you think? Like,
Oh my God. Sorry. Yeah. Like.
we were like, like, is this
Oh,
something that we were just like, is she okay? As she was coming to, she seemed like maybe she
yeah.
was okay. And she was, first she was a little,
Oh, like she had just.
yeah, we
Yeah. I
thought
guess
maybe
it.
she passed
Yeah. You
out.
never
We were
know. Yeah.
confused. Or if she fell. We
Yeah.
didn't know what had happened. right? She was just like lying on the floor face down.
Yeah.
So I kind of went into the other room and I called them, but I've never called you have to understand, I never called 911 in my life. So I called
Yeah.
911 and I was like, hey, they're like, oh, what is your emergency? All that stuff. And I was like, hi, I'm just to be clear, I'm not sure it's an emergency. I shouldn't even be calling you. I was like, just let you know, I think I have my mother, and I was trying to explain it. And then they called me from the other room and I was like, you know what, never mind. Don't worry about it. And they like hung up.
Mm.
At the time, I wasn't sure if I'd even called, like, if you do that, do they come? Like, I wasn't
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
So I came back and I guess my mother she felt pain. Weirdly enough, that's why I stopped. I think
Mm.
that's why I stopped talking to them because my mother was feeling pain. She was having trouble
Mm.
breathing and it started getting worse. And I was trying to figure out me and my dad were like, what does she need? And she eventually started kind of crying out that she couldn't breathe very well. It hurt to breathe. And again, I was very confused. She started getting louder and it woke up my brother, Alex. I remember he got up first and he came
Mm.
out and we were surrounding her. And then she started screaming some more and it woke up my brother, Daniel. And all of us were like standing around her basically. And she started screaming, I'm going to die. I'm going to die. We're like, you're not going to die. I remember I said that to her. I was like, you're not going to die. And that was, of
Yeah.
course, that's what
Well, I mean, that
someone's,
is what you say, even if you knew. Like,
I didn't think I had no. I was like, I'm like, okay, like
no, of course
something
not.
hurts,
Yeah.
whatever. You're not. But anyways, at that point, I remember thinking. So my dad, I remember he was like, so did you call them? I'm like, I don't know. Did you? He's like, what do you mean you don't know? I'm like, I don't know if I called them or not. Like so I went back and I called them again.
Yeah.
But this time I was like, yeah, come. But they were like, I think they already were coming. I think that if you called, they were
Probably.
already on
Yeah.
their way.
Yeah.
So I remember literally running downstairs to try to grab her an ice pack or something because she was screaming in pain. And I literally, when I've tried to pass by her, she said, I love you to me. And I said,
Oh.
I was like, love you too. But she did. Yeah, I went down, I got the ice pack, I came back. I remember I was like in my boxer, in my sleepwear, like, I was basically in my
Yeah.
underwear. And
Mm.
I remember it was getting very bad. She was screaming, she was in pain. I'm going to die. I'm going to die. The ambulance felt like it was taking forever to come. So I remember running outside just to, I was very frustrated. The ambulance wasn't there. I ran
Yeah.
outside in my underwear and it was snowing, which was very weird because, like you mentioned before, Passover, this is springtime. This was the end of April, beginning of May,
Mm.
like this was springtime and our tulips were out. They come out just in, for a few weeks in spring. And I just remember this image of it snowing on our tulips.
Mm.
That's where that came from. And I'm pretty sure I like yelled for the ambulance, like, where the hell's the ambulance, right? They
Yeah.
just weren't there. And then I heard my mother scream really, really loudly. Just kind of one last really loud scream. And I went running back upstairs and she went quiet, basically. Just, and her face looked, it was very weird, her like glazed over. And it was very noisy before that. She was yelling, everyone was bustling about. It suddenly went totally quiet. And I remember just being like, is she okay? I asked my dad, is she fine? He's like, I don't know. I'm like, well, is everything okay? She can be all right. He's like, I don't know. It was why he didn't have an answer.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just remember when she did that too, this was very haunting. This is one of the things that actually haunts me still. My dad was holding her on the ground there and he when she stopped yelling, so my mom's name was Jeanette. And so he said, he was just like, Jeanette. And he was like, his voice was cracking. He was trying to like, and she wouldn't answer. And that was very, yeah, that still haunts me to this day. Anyway, the weird thing is, it's not like as soon as that happened, the ambulances showed up. We were still waiting for the ambulance and we were
Yeah.
just there with her. And
Oh my God.
we didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
So literally, I
Mm.
remember like pacing back and forth in the room, looking out the window, coming back, looking out the window. Uh,
Yeah.
this is the part, in the movies when you see this happen, this isn't usually what, the waiting is not what you see.
Yeah.
Right. And I
Yeah.
remember being the one to try to like, I was like, guys, she just like passed out. You know how it is in the movies, right? One goes
Mm.
unconscious, the ambulance comes, they wake him up, she'll be okay. So I was telling my family she'll
Yeah.
be fine. Eventually they did show up. Again, it was a very slow process. They got out really slowly, and they pulled out the stretcher really
Oh my
everything was just
god,
super
what
slow. I just
that's
remember it being very, like, in
yeah,
my mind, I'm like, "You gotta, fast, right?" But they
yeah,
came and they took her. Basically, they asked if one of if someone would come to the hospital, like, with them, like, ride in the ambulance with them, and for some reason, there was, like, a question of whether it would be me or my father, and I almost went with,
mm,
but in the end, my dad went with. I think that makes sense. But anyways, it was just like, at the end, it was just
yeah,
me and my brothers and I. We were just back at home alone. Actually,
yeah.
that's not true. I totally forgot to mention. So my grandmother was again in the house the whole time, and she was in one of
Oh,
those rooms in the
yeah,
hallway, and she slept through the entire thing.
yeah.
There was screaming and
Oh my
everything, but she
gosh,
slept through it. She
yeah,
was in her room. The door was closed, and it was
yeah.
right outside her door too.
Jeez.
So I just remember my brothers went to play like video games. Like it was very strange. Like we were just suddenly home alone in the middle of the night, waiting. Both our parents were gone. We were just waiting.
Yeah,
And after some time, I don't know if it was a half an hour. Again, it's getting to be morning, right?
mm,
There was a knock at our door, and I went to go open the door, and there was two police officers there, and one took off his hat. It's like you've seen this before, right? Right? And
yeah,
he's like, may we come in? And I was like,
mm,
sure. And they came to our kitchen table, and my brothers and I sat around again. We were all in our underwear. And the officer was like, so we come to tell you that your mother was in the ambulance, and they did everything they could, but she didn't make it. And then there was this like awkward silence. I remember like I didn't respond. Like I remember my brother Alex tear came
yeah.
out or something. Like he cried a little bit. It was just kind of like I guess it was a shock.
Of course, yeah,
And immediately I remember my brain going
yeah,
into like pragmatic mode. What do I do? How do we, anyways, the officers also asked if they could take a look around the house. They just wanted to,
mm.
not just that, sorry, before that, they asked for a statement. So I'm the one who gave the statement. So I had to then tell them
Yeah.
exactly what happened that night. So I guess that's the first time I told the
Oh,
story
wow.
was to the officer.
Yeah, that's what this is. This is actually just a statement that you're giving right now.
Yeah, I'm just giving you my statement.
Yeah.
And then I explained what happened, and he asked if he could be shown around. I just remember what really bothered me when he was being taken around is he kept his boots on, and they were kind of muddy, and we had carpeting. He was just like walking on our
Mm.
carpet. I just remember, should I say something?
Yeah. It's weird how the regular things don't go
Exactly.
away when you're in like
They don't show this in the
in a
movies again.
yeah. Well, they do in some. If it was a Coen Brothers film, maybe be like, do you mind taking off your I don't know.
Basically, my life is a Coen Brothers movie.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So yeah, I showed him around. I just remember he kept seeing things and taking notes, and I could tell things looked
Mm.
suspicious to him. Like when he was looking around. So he
Oh.
came up to my dad's room, and he had all these bags that were packed because he was going on a trip the
Oh, yeah,
next
right,
day.
because he was going on a trip. Yeah.
And then he saw on the carpet there was that spot of blood. And then we went to in the bathroom. There was this. I thought it was like I guess it must have been like makeup stain, but it looked kind of like blood in there or something.
Mm.
I just remember every time he saw one of these things, he started writing notes. And I'm thinking, what is he writing? What's he writing? Why is he writing that? What is he? Anyway, eventually, we came back down. I got a phone call from my dad in the hospital, and my dad was just broken. He did not like he didn't
Yeah.
he had no idea what to do. He was so confused. He was like trying to tell me what happened. I'm like, I know the cops are here. They just told us.
Yeah.
We were trying to figure out like what happened. Why did it happen? And they were saying it was her leg. She had a blood clot in her leg. Which now, if I flash back for a second, so a couple days before, I remember waking up and I was late to go to school, and I missed my bus. And again, my mom was up really
Mm.
late into the night, so she wasn't just like up in the morning. So I went and like woke up my mother and asked if she could like
Right.
drive me to school. I was like, I would miss my bus. I'm sorry. And she's like, I'm like, what? You want me to fail school? Like, come on. Right. And
Yeah.
I go, okay, okay. But she was like taking her time. And I was like, come on, we got to go. I'm going to miss first period. She's like, it's your fault. Like, you got to go on my schedule
Yeah.
now. And I'm like, it's not funny. Like, this is school. Like,
Yeah.
she's like, well, I can't just leave your grandmother here. So we got to get her ready too. I'm like, oh God. So we're getting my grandmother ready to come with. And then, anyways, I just remember it took forever. I'm like, okay, maybe I'll make it still to part of first period. And I remember on the way, she stopped for coffee at Tim Hortons. I'm like, what are you doing?
Like,
She's like, I need my coffee. She was addicted to Tim Hortons. I'm like, could you get this afterwards? She's like,
yeah.
look, this is my time you're on right now. So You just got, I'm like, oh my God. So we're like waiting for
Yeah.
Tim Hortons. But anyways, on that drive,
Yeah.
I remember her just kind of casually telling me, she was like, I think I have a blood clot.
Oh, jeez.
I didn't know what that meant. I was like, what? I was like, that sounds bad. She's like, well,
Yeah.
you know, I had,
Yeah.
it turns out she actually had one of these a long time ago when she was
Oh,
having my youngest brother. She was pregnant with it, like, and she said, I remember her saying like, oh, it almost killed
yeah.
me or something. I'm like, is that bad? She's like, well, I'll go to the doctor later and I'll see. I'm like, okay. It sounded so casual.
Yeah.
Anyways, she apparently did go later, and
Okay.
basically the doctor gave her some blood thinners and was like, if it gets any worse, like just
Oh,
then go to the hospital. Sure. Okay. So, anyways, I remember the night of Passover, she was in some pain. She was like not feeling great. And my dad was like, maybe you should go to the hospital. And my mom's like,
yeah.
I'll go tomorrow.
Mhm. Yeah. Classic.
She wanted to do the Seder. She didn't want to. So
Oh, jeez.
I should say to this day, my dad at the time he was blaming himself. Like he should have. I remember he told the rabbi at one point, he was like, I
Oh,
should have pushed her. I should have made her go to the hospital. And the rabbi's like, you know, the Rabbi Laser.
yeah. Yeah.
He was like, Larry, since when have you ever been one to push anyone to do anything? That's not who you are.
Yeah.
You're not that type of person. And that's a good thing, you know? That was a very sweet thing to say.
Yeah.
Anyways, I'm getting both behind and ahead of myself. Uh,
It's okay.
um, going back, so my dad calls. We talk about how they said it was a blood clot in her leg, and that's what it was. She had a pulmonary embolism. I don't know if you know what that is at all, but she basically there was a blood clot in her leg, and a piece broke off, and it went to her lungs.
Okay.
By the way, I should say it turns out that we actually have this thing in our family. It's called factor five Leiden.
Oh.
It's like your blood is more likely to clot, kind of a thing.
Hmm. How do you know?
At the time, I didn't know. We didn't know. My cousins told me about this, and I had a 50% chance of having this thing.
Oh, wow.
And actually, my uncle, I think he died from my mother's brother. If not that long ago, he died from something similar. And my grandfather also, I think he had, they gave him like blood thinners. I think, from what I heard, I could be wrong.
Yeah.
They gave him blood thinners for this thing, and then the blood thinners it led to a brain hemorrhage, and he died from that.
Oh,
So there was this thing in our family I didn't know.
yeah.
I remember going back and getting checked, and I was like, I'm certain for some reason, I was certain I had it. It's a 50% chance I have it for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm the same.
Yeah.
Like 50% chance, 100%
Yes.
chance I have it then.
It turns out they said I don't have it,
Oh, that's good.
but my brothers had never gotten checked. And of my cousins and my mom's brother, the one who died, his kids, two of them
Hmm.
have it, two of them don't.
Oh, okay.
And you just have to, there's nothing you can do. If you have it, they say if you're on a plane, take an aspirin. It's a bit of a blood thinner, just in case, pressure
Oh,
or whatever.
how do you check for it?
There's a blood
Is it like a
test.
blood
Yeah, it was a
test?
test. I had to pay $100 to find out. Uh,
Well,
there you go.
it's worth it. No,
And then you find out what can you really do. They said just try to not be out of shape and
it's good to know. Be on the
yeah.
lookout for.
So anyway, going back to this phone call I had with my dad, he was like, I guess we have to tell people. Again, these are the things,
Hmm.
one part of the story I'm telling you here is the trauma of what happened, but it's these other things that are also that stick with me.
Yeah.
We determined we have to tell people what happened. And my dad was so broken, he couldn't
Yeah.
even think, he didn't know where to begin. And I was like, don't worry, Dad, I'll do it. He's like, you will? I'm like, yeah, I'll do it. You stay at the hospital, do whatever you got to do. So
Mm.
I immediately had to pick up a phone and start calling people to tell them
Oh my
at 4 or
God.
5 in the morning, whatever it was at the time, 5 and 6 in the morning. So I'm
Yeah.
like, okay. So first person, of course, I call is my mom's brother, my uncle, to tell them what happened. And again, it's early there. They're in Buffalo, New York. I'm like, hi, like Uncle Michael.
Hey, how are you
Yeah.
doing? Oh, got some
Yeah.
news.
Hey.
Got some
So they're
news.
like,
You may want to be sitting down.
I was like, so I have something to tell you. Again, it was so awkward. I didn't realize while I was saying it, how do you say this? I was like, so
Yeah.
my or our mom died this morning.
Yeah. Jeez.
Immediately, my uncle's response was just like, what, what, like how, like, and immediately they were like, we'll be right over. We're coming.
Oh, okay.
And again, they were in Buffalo, 4 hours away. So they got
Mm.
in a car and they were on their way. And I thought, okay, like I've done this now once.
It's good
I can,
family.
yeah,
Yeah.
I've done this once. I can do this again. This is like a thing, like I'm building up. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to call my dad's sister, my Aunt Sheila.
Mm.
I remember calling her and be like, hey, Aunt Sheila. And she's like, Josh? And I'm like, yeah. And she's
Yeah.
like, what do you do? It's so early. What are you calling me so early? I'm like, I'm sorry, I have to call you. She's like, do you realize what time it is? Like, it's really early. I'm like, I
Oh
know
my
I have to
gosh.
call you for something. She's like, it's really, I don't know why you would be calling me at this. And I'm like, I know, I
Oh my
have
god.
to. She's like, okay, just so you understand, like, this is really early. You shouldn't be calling people at this time. I get
Oh
it.
my god.
I'm like, there's something I have to tell you. She's like, well, what? What do you have to tell me? What's going on? What? I'm like, so our mother died this morning. And she went, oh, I'm really sorry to hear that. And I'm like,
Yeah.
that's a kind of a strange. I know that that's what you say, like when somebody you don't know, like a friend or something, you tell someone like, yeah, my
Right.
grandpa died, oh, I'm sorry to hear that, But
Yeah.
like I just told her my mom died, and she was like, oh, I'm really sorry. I'm sorry to hear
That's
that.
pretty
And I was
strange.
like, yeah,
Are you?
yeah.
Are you sure?
And she was like, well, she's been sick for a while, right? And I'm like, uh, not that I
Oh.
know of. No, I didn't know that. She's like, yeah, with the
Yeah.
Alzheimer's, and I was like, oh, I was
Oh,
like,
she thought it was no.
no, no, that's. I said my mother. She's like, yeah, your grandmother. I was like, no, no, my mother. She's like, your grandmother. She's with Alzheimer's. I'm like, yeah, she has Alzheimer's. I'm talking about my mother. She's like, no, no, you mean your grandmother. I'm like, no, you're not telling me. I'm telling you, my mother died. My grandmother. She's like, what about your grandmother? I'm like, she's fine. She's upstairs.
She's fine.
she's
Playing
she's like,
cards.
I don't understand. What are you saying? I'm like, so this is the right response, right?
Oh, so this makes way
This
more
makes way
sense.
more sense.
Okay,
Again,
yeah.
it's a Coen Brothers movie. So again, first it's hard for me to say, and I'm like, no, listen, my mother's dead, my grandmother's alive, but my mother's dead. She's gone. She died. She's no more. But my grandmother.
It it went from being like difficult emotionally to like get that kind of thing
Yeah,
out to being just like really difficult to actually just communicate
exactly.
this to a person.
Again,
Yeah.
that's
Oh
not.
my
This
god.
is the
Yeah.
stuff that. Again, when I make a movie about it, it might be in the movie. All right, so I
Yeah.
went through a list,
Yeah.
and eventually some people started showing up at the house. And do you know Darlene Zafman Guslitz, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, so she was the first one I think to show up at the house. It was
Mm,
very sweet, and my mom's friend Penny Van Leeuwen also showed
right.
up, and Marnie Richmond. And yeah, again, they were all trying to being motherly and trying to be there for us, the kids. Everyone was talking about the Lippman boys, right? All three of.
Mm,
And my dad was kind of checked out both physically and mentally at the moment.
yeah.
It was a very strange time. I just remember then, so my grandmother had this caregiver that would come by, and my grandmother was still asleep upstairs, like she hadn't gotten up yet. Again, this is my mother's mother,
Yeah.
and my grandmother's caregiver was like this bubbly woman, super bubbly, and she shows up at the door. I remember we have to like tell her like my dad's there, and I'm trying to like figure out a way to like. She's like, oh hi, super bubbly,
Yeah.
and my dad basically is the one who was just like, Jeanette died this morning.
Oh my gosh.
He just says this, and I just remember her bubbly demeanor just dropping
Yeah.
like a block of ice, and she goes, fuck. And I was like, oh, I hadn't seen that side of her before.
Yeah. And you're like, "Oh, I like you way better now, bubbly."
My dad's like, and we want you to could you please not tell Alice? Alice is my grandmother.
Oh, okay.
Please don't tell Alice what happened. And she's like, okay, she's just doing whatever she's told. Anyway, she helps. I guess she goes upstairs, and eventually my grandmother comes down, and my grandmother sees all these people here in the house, and she's thinking there's a party.
Oh.
She was just like, what are all these people here? Like, what's going on? And we just didn't tell my
Yeah.
grandmother what happened.
Like ever?
No.
Well, I mean, you would have had to tell her over and over again, right? Like she wouldn't have.
Maybe. So here's what we determined. Again, this was a real moral question that we had,
Yeah.
and I made a movie about it actually. It's called After Rachel. You can check it out
Oh,
online.
okay.
It's actually it's a,
All
it's a
right.
good movie, or at least based on about that idea. It's different. That was more about a guy whose wife dies, and he hides the truth from his father-in-law who has Alzheimer's. So
Mm,
similar. And there's a real question if you're like, should we have told her? But again, she was pretty far gone. But that always came, she always asked, where's Jeanette? Where's Jeanette? Where's your mother? I said, she's at the store. She's she's out getting groceries or getting gas, or I just come up with something. She'll be back
yeah.
later. Which again is it's one thing for her, but it's another thing what it's doing to us every time we have to.
I was thinking more of that. I mean, she might, yeah, it might kind of slide off because I mean, I don't know how far, but for you to have to keep lying about that is pretty intense, no?
Yeah, it's strange, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, we only had to do that for a week because my uncle came and took her away to a home in, I think, Buffalo.
Okay.
But during that week, I should mention that later in the week, she found a letter of condolence from somebody, and she read it, and she turned to me and she said, what's going on? And I'm like, what are you talking about? She's like,
Yeah.
where's Jeanette? I'm like, she's out. She's like, where is she? I'm like, Grandma, don't worry about it. Like, it's fine. She's like, there is something you are not telling me. And she sounded lucid for a moment. Like, she's like, what are you not telling me?
Yeah.
Tell me now. She was like, her voice was shaking. I'm like, Grandma, everything's fine. And I just walked away. I just couldn't deal with
Oh
that. And
no.
anyway, she was taken away to a home,
Yeah.
and I only talked to her once more. I got a call from her from the home a couple months later, I think it was, and on the phone, my uncle was like, "You want to talk to your grandmother?" And I was like, "Sure." And she was like, "She's like, so how's Jeanette? How's your mother? Where's Jeanette?" And that's what she was left with. So it seemed like she knew for a moment, and then I don't know, and then she died not long after that. Actually, I went to 2 funerals in in a very short span of time.
Jeez.
But anyway, going back,
Yeah.
so that day was pretty crazy. But anyway, I call that day. I think I said this on the podcast before, but I call that day my day of thinking. Basically, I wanted to like figure it all out in my head that day. Like I wanted like plan out how I was going to be. I had this idea in my mind that I was going to be this person that was going to deal with it in a good way, in a healthy way. And I mentioned before too, there's some complicated aspects to this because again, my mother was not always the nicest person, to say it lightly. And we were dealing with the fact that suddenly my brothers were we were able to do whatever we wanted, we play video games as much as we wanted, we could watch things, and I felt guilty about a lot of that, right?
Right. Of course. Yeah.
You know, my dad wasn't stopping me from doing anything. I didn't have to go to bed. I didn't have to do anything. I could have just left and come back whenever I wanted. There was no rules. All the rules went out the window. At some point, that might have been a dream, right? Not like this, right? The next day I remember thinking, I'm gonna go to school. I was excited because I had like a drama play. I had a play I was gonna put on in drama class. And I was excited to do
Yeah.
this play. I think it wasn't a play, it was a monologue. I remember reading it to my mother too beforehand, and she said it was good. I remember
Oh.
reading her my monologue and asking her what she thought. I totally forgot that I did that actually till just now. But yeah, I did. I read her this
Mm.
monologue. I was playing some like British soldier or something. I don't know. So I had to practice it on the Monday. Again, so she died on a Sunday or Saturday night. Like now was Sunday was our day of dealing with it. And then Monday was school. And I went to school in the morning on Monday. And
Yeah.
apparently one of my mom's friends had called the school just to say we weren't going to school. She just assumed we weren't going to school. And I was
Yeah.
like, so I was like, of course I'm going to school. I didn't want to just sit at home and be depressed and think, I wanted to go to school.
Yeah. That's almost worse
Yeah.
potentially. Yeah.
So I went to school, and so each class, the teachers seemed to have been called to the office partway through the class and came back. I remember my drama teacher going to the office and coming back, and he said, "Josh, what are you doing here?"
Oh my God.
See, this episode is about drama. Um,
It is.
there you go.
Yeah. And at least I like how honest he was, because a lot of teachers would just not even say anything.
Yeah. But he was like so dramatic, like his real drama
Yeah.
teacher. He was like,
Yeah.
"What are you
What are
doing
you
here?" And I
doing?
was like, he's like, "What? Do you want to be here?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's fine. Don't worry about it." He's like, "Are you sure?" I was like, "Yeah, let me, I just want to be here. I want to do my work." And he was like,
Yeah.
"Okay." Like,
Are you usually good at compartmentalizing like that?
yes, that's something I've been known to do, is be pretty good at compartmentalizing. At least I used to. I don't know if I've changed.
Yeah.
But this was my first real test of it, I think.
Yeah.
And in every class, like the teacher would be like, should you be here right now? I'm like, don't worry, it's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course, news was spreading around the school too. Josh's mom just died.
Yeah.
Anyway, I remember the next day was the funeral. You know, us Jews, we don't embalm the body or anything like that. You got to get it buried really fast.
Yeah.
So just 2 days later, right? But I still wanted to go to school because Tuesday was the day of my monologue. So
Yeah.
it was in first period, the monologue. So I asked my dad, I'm like, can I just do my monologue and then go to the funeral? And because it was a little later, right? The funeral. And he said, okay. So he went and
Was the funeral in the evening
I don't
or?
actually, it obviously, I think it went towards the evening. Yeah, more in the evening.
Okay.
I don't know. I had to go. I went to the funeral pretty shortly after my first period. I don't know. I remember doing that monologue and I did really well. I remember getting like almost 100% on it. Thinking, now it took me years to then realize, I'm like, wait a second, maybe the teacher was just, I'm like, did I do that well? Or was the teacher feeling a little bad for me? But literally the how well I did on
Well,
that monologue literally pushed me to like continue and drama. I remember thinking, I feel really confident about this. I should keep going down this path of the arts. It might
yeah.
have been one of the reasons I went into filmmaking.
If maybe we would have gone to 94, it still would have been pretty good,
Or
right?
maybe, who knows?
Or 70. No.
I did my best, but
I'm sure it was good. I'm sure it was
I
fine. I
got a
mean,
98%. I remember I got 98% on this thing. It's a
That's
very
awesome.
specific number if you
Yeah.
think about it for a monologue. But anyway,
I mean, yeah.
yeah. So maybe he was like, I got to take two so he doesn't think it's like,
Yeah, I don't wanna be the bearer
I
of bad I don't wanna make any assumptions
don't
here,
want to make
so
him to think I gave it to him for free. So let's to give him a 98, not 100.
yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, exactly. 100's too obvious, yeah.
I should note it was snowing the day my mom died, which was weird, right? Even my dad, I remember telling him this, but we talked about this, and my dad was like, that is kind of
Mm.
weird. My dad was not a religious person or anything, but even he was like, it's kind of
Yeah,
weird just that day.
yeah,
And then it was raining at the funeral.
yeah.
And so I don't know if you heard this
Oh,
term before. You know what pathetic fallacy is?
yes. Yeah, it's when, like, the environment reflects how you feel on the inside.
Exactly. So this was like real case of pathetic fallacy, like snowing the night my mom died and raining at the funeral.
Yeah,
Everything seemed to reflect that. I just remember like my uncle got us like a limousine and it smelled like cigarettes. We were in this black limo. Like apparently that's what you do. You go into the funeral. Also, I remember like
yeah,
take my uncle is a very he was like a very reserved kind of person, very sweet, but very kind of kept things to himself. And
yeah.
I knew we were close enough. I'd go visit him and stuff. I didn't really know him, right? I just remember like leaving to get in the car, I guess, to go, and he was like, "Grab a jacket." And I was like, "Don't, I'm fine. I'm not that cold." He's like, "Grab a jacket." And I'm like, "It's okay. I don't need a jacket." And he like turned. He's like, "Get a jacket now." And he'd never in his life ever talked to me like this.
Yeah.
I suddenly realized he was very like that's what he was holding in. Like, and his sister just died, and his younger sister.
Yeah,
And again, my mom was like what 48 years old, I think, at the time,
yeah,
and
yeah,
my uncle was trying to be someone to try to he had to take care of a lot himself. There was a lot to take care of. I didn't understand with my dad and my uncle and all that stuff, right?
yeah,
Anyway, so we went to the funeral. So you've been to some Jewish funerals before, right? You know the
yeah,
part where the immediate
yeah.
family like shovel
The Yeah, you have to shovel in.
dirt. Yeah. So my brothers and I, we all took turns shoveling
Yeah,
dirt onto the casket in the grave. I remember even my sensei at Aikido. He used to take Aikido. He showed up at the funeral. Like all these people showed up, and I never went to Aikido again.
oh.
I was a brown belt in Aikido. That stopped. We couldn't, it was too much to do.
Oh,
I used to,
oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that it
yeah,
stopped
it
then,
stopped.
yeah,
It stopped after that. Anyway, so that's that story. I mean, there's more things that happen after, but it took a while. Sorry, but yeah.
no, it's good. I mean, it's good, but, like, it's a detailed
I
story. You remember a lot when stuff like that happens, so
just to add to what happened here. My music teacher, who I've had since I was 4 years old, from 4 until I was 16, and he would come over to my house every 2 weeks. I mean, he's very close with my mother. My mother liked him a lot, and
mm,
he continued to teach us music. He'd come over to the house still afterwards. He was teaching me, I think, guitar by
mm,
this point. Actually, he used to be piano, and
mm,
just for a few weeks. And I remember thinking, like, this was something that was still keeping me like going. Not that I wasn't going, but like it was very therapeutic for me to continue doing music lessons.
yeah.
And then not long after that, my music teacher ended up getting arrested on 18 sex charges against children.
Oh my gosh.
Uh, and I remember my dad being like, Josh, come upstairs and read this. And it was in the paper. And we were like, what? And we didn't want to believe it at first. And
Yeah,
he basically, yeah, he ended up moving to the province where the charges stemmed from. And I never saw him again. And I was dealing, I remember thinking, like, oh my God, at least my mom didn't have to see this.
yeah,
But there was just like a bunch of things started to shatter. A lot of images, my image of this like family unit
yeah,
and of people, right? Like it was just a lot of changes were going on. And I started questioning
mm,
life and what life was all about and mortality, kind of like Pierce was talking about in the episode where he talked about his dad's death.
yeah.
So anyways, yeah.
Did it change a lot of how you think or how you approach life?
Yes, everything kind of changed for me actually. So I think about it, I think I became did it change how I approach life? I think there was just something missing before that. Again, when people haven't experienced the sense of mortality, it kind of just hits you whether you realize it or not. Like you're gonna die. Like we hear it, but you really know it. Like people around you are gonna die, and you're gonna die, and you don't have a lot of time, and it can happen at any time. You start thinking about your priorities and what matters in life. You know what's weird on a different level, I should say. I didn't react at the time in a way that was like again, I didn't cry, whatever. It took me a little while. It took me like a day or two before I think I was at night. I just started thinking about it and I started crying in bed. But I hadn't responded that way. I was in such a like a pragmatic mode. But I remember there's certain times and that things kind of hit you. I remember when I came back from school. So my brothers were in elementary school still. They were still at our Hebrew school where we went, you and I went. I was in
Mm,
grade 10 at high school, but my middle brother was 2 years younger, so he was in grade 8 at the Hebrew school still. So I was at high school and I would come home before them. I would come home and my dad would be at work. He never went on that work trip, by the way. He canceled that work trip.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, as soon as I walked in the door, I hear my mother yell from upstairs, Josh, how was school today?
Mm.
And I answer, it's good, it's fine. And I remember walking in the door for the first time after this happened, and it was just silent. That was like that hit me. There's been a change. Things are different now. I should also mention, by the way, speaking of my father, his work thing. Remember, I said it seems suspicious to those guys. So they did an autopsy
Yeah.
on my mother, which they only do if they suspect potential foul play.
Yeah.
And so my dad to this day is sore about this.
Wow.
Like he's like, they think, what do they think I did?
Yeah. Oh my God, your dad's like the
Yeah,
night,
he's
like
so sweet. And
he's like a
I was
very
like, Dad,
sweet,
he's
yeah.
like, no, they think, I'm like, Dad, they had to look into it. Don't worry. It's not a personal thing. He's like, no, they think
Yeah.
I'm like, no, they didn't think you did anything. They just don't know, maybe they saw the packed bags. I don't
Yeah.
know. So,
Yeah, I mean, maybe they do it more often if it's I don't know. I don't know. I'm not gonna weigh in on that, but
you're like, I don't, I think it just, there was enough there to check, I guess.
yeah, yeah.
So that's that
Um,
story.
yeah.
Dr. Ishai, thanks for listening.
Well, yeah. Thank you. No, serious, but I know we both deal with things with humor. I think your humor is quite dark, even for me. Sometimes
Right.
I can't always. You've got
I make a lot of people feel uncomfortable with my humor sometimes because it's true, it's a defense mechanism, right? But also life is absurd.
for sure.
Look what
Yeah,
I told you. Look, I told you about my aunt and how she responded. Like that's
yeah.
objectively funny.
That is objectively funny.
It's dark. It's in the context of something upsetting, but it's objectively funny. And the truth is, life is absurd, and using humor to deal with
Yeah,
it is, to me, very natural. In fact, it's a very healthy way to deal with it because how do you? It's so absurd that you have to kind of laugh at the absurdity of it all. And there's more stories like that. I mean, my grandmother thinking it was a party or whatever, and
yeah, yeah.
uh,
I mean, if it weren't in the context, yeah, it is. It is healthy, I
mhm.
assume, to laugh at the darkest things. I hope it is, because that's my go-to as well,
Yeah.
generally.
But
So
the things that stick with me were just like the way that I still remember at that dinner table, my grandma, my mother saying, let her read because she's not going to be with us next year. And it being my mother
yeah, she didn't know she wasn't.
that's
Yeah,
not going to be, I mean, I guess
yeah,
both of them weren't because my grandmother died too, but it was just these things,
yeah.
they stay with you. And you know what, a weird thing is I had a dream about a week before this happened.
Mm.
I had a dream that my mom died, and it was so visceral, using that word again. It was so visceral. I remember waking up thinking it really happened, and then I had to like remind myself, oh, it's fine, she's still alive, it's just a dream, it's just a
Oh,
dream.
jeez.
and
Yeah,
then and then it happened. And I remember, of course, I have friends that was
yeah.
like, oh my god, you know what that means? Like, I'm like, I don't think it means anything, but anyway.
Well, you are very dismissive of dreams
Yeah, I don't care about
normally,
dreams.
in
I
a
don't care about,
way,
they don't mean
right?
anything. It's just whatever you're thinking about tends to be what you dream about, in my opinion, but or subconsciously or consciously.
Yeah,
But
maybe.
speaking of things that happened before that, I want, do you remember Robin Sass?
Yeah.
So I also remember, again, these are just weird things that happen. I remember 2 days before my mom passed. So Robin's dad died.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. And my brother, from what my brother had said, he wasn't doing very well. He was kind of acting out. Like it was very difficult for him. And my brother was friends with Robin, and he basically came to my mother, and I was just there when he came to my mother on the couch. And he
Yeah.
was like, Robin's dad died. And what do I say to him? What do I do? Like how
Yeah.
do I, and my mother was like trying to explain to my brother what to do to be there for someone who's lost a parent.
Oh, jeez.
And 2 days later he lost a parent.
Oh my gosh.
And I remember it was very different for the last experience I had with my mother was she said I love you to me. It's the last thing she said, despite all
Yeah.
the issues I had with my mother, and I've talked about that before. She said I love you. I think the last interaction my brother Daniel had was he got grounded.
Oh, he didn't wake up before she
I mean, she didn't have any, as far as I know, she didn't have any sort of interaction. There wasn't an I love you to him. It wasn't like that,
Oh, yeah.
I could be wrong, but that was his
Yeah.
experience was very different there. To this day, I mean, I can see the nuance with my mother a little bit. I mean, she definitely, I mentioned before, I think she could be kind of abusive. She had a kind of an authoritarian, these authoritarian tendencies. But my brother, I hope it's okay to say this on here, but like my brother will say things like, I'm happy she's dead. That's how bad it was. That's his perspective of her. But I think sometimes that extreme response is also is a way to deal with it because of that cognitive dissonance that you feel. And I felt a lot of cognitive dissonance.
And I mean, also the fact that he was left with probably like really conflicting. I mean, you all were, but if he was grounded, but now he also lost his mother,
Yeah,
and it's like it's so much easier to be angry than anything else.
exactly. Who to be angry at, right? That's the problem. In fact, he directed a lot of it at me because he thought I was trying to be kind of like mom after this. I remember there was a point, for example, where I remember him, I think something like this happened where he went, and my brother got into some, without going into detail, he got into some shady stuff afterwards. He went down a certain path. But I remember him like going out and I was like, aren't you grounded? Like after this, he's like, what are you going to do about it? Like, I'm like, aren't you, in my mind, I'm like, is he still grounded if my mom's dead? Like, like,
Is it just like indefinite because she's not there to unground him? So like,
no, it was, I think it was right. That was shortly after.
oh, it was like still the amount of time. Okay.
Yeah. I think I'm like, aren't you
It
still
wasn't like she's not here to unground you, so you're grounded indefinitely.
that? Or maybe there was just some rule he was breaking. I can't remember the exact details, but I questioned it. It's like, well, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Like, I think, you know,
Yeah.
but anyway, that spot of blood on the carpet that where remember I told you where she,
Yeah. Yeah.
her lip, it stained the carpet there. And I think to this day,
Oh,
there's still a
jeez.
stain there. And every
Oh
time
my
I go, so I'd
gosh.
be triggered every
Yeah.
time I went by
Of course.
that spot. And I like right there, all the memories would come back to me there. And I'd be, I used to do like push-ups around that spot, like motivation. I said, is that weird? I used to do, again, there's all these things like it was like it was like a strange, I don't know. It worked me
Well,
up, I guess, you know.
that's actually not strange, I think, because you'd be like,
No, Dr. Ishai?
I mean, you're reminded of this crazy thing that happened, and then your body's like in flight mode,
Maybe.
and then you need
Flight
to
mode?
get it out. So you start doing push-ups. Flight mode, yeah, like, fight,
Fight
flight,
or flight?
freeze,
What's this, Aya? Tell me about
fight or
this.
flight. Well, I don't think we segue from a deeply
Segue. I'm
emotional,
segueing
personal
it.
story. Are
You can
you,
do it. You're the
well,
queen of
but I have a
segue.
question
Okay,
for you
what's the
first.
question?
I'm a queen. We'll get back to the four F's. We'll get to
Four
them.
F's. That sounds dirty.
Uh, and we're into the joke section of this podcast. I do want to ask you, well, because you just said that your brother kind of started to see you as trying to like take sort of the mom
Yeah.
spot, not spot, but like there are a few times in that story where it seemed like people were confused about who was the parent, like in a way. So
Well,
I
we
mean,
there was a real, like, what do you call it? There was a void of that role
right.
in our house.
Yeah, but even so, uh you being the one to call
Right.
911,
Yeah.
well, maybe that less than them not knowing if you were going to go to the hospital with her. Why wouldn't it just be the
Okay.
husband? I guess they were worried about leaving you at home with your brothers, but like,
I didn't know the answer, but I also think my dad had a lot of indecision about what to do in a moment.
hmm,
And that would
right,
prompt
yeah,
maybe he should. Like, there was a certain,
right,
my dad was so, looking back, that's in some ways one of the most traumatic elements to this to me was the reaction was seeing how my dad responded to things. Like, it really broke him. And I think he
yeah,
hasn't really been the same since. There was something, I'll be honest, I think my mother didn't always treat my dad very well, to be nice about that. uh, and I think
yeah,
there's certain things that actually got better over time for him too, because I know if he ever would have left that relationship, which he probably should have. Not that this is the way it should have happened, but again, these are the cognitive dissonance about it all.
right, yeah,
But he was really broken after that, and you're right. There was this at a lot of different times who's the parent here, right? That was a real question. I had this kind of sense that I wanted to prove that when she passed, I wanted to prove that like I said, my mother was very strict to the point of being abusive, and she had all these really crazy rules. Let me give you an example of something she did here too, because this was,
yeah,
I think I brought it up before, like how she could be, right? I remember I just mentioned Aikido.
hmm,
I remember once when we finished up, my mother would pick us up from Aikido. Sometimes it was my father, but my mother would pick us up often. And my brothers and I, we were all at Aikido, and it would end and we would leave and go to the car and she'd drive us home. Anyways, we were leaving, my brothers left, but they were cleaning up the mats, and they asked me, Josh, could you stick around for a minute and just help us clean up the mats? And I'm like, I looked out the window and I could see out the window that my mother's car was waiting there. And I was like, oh, my
Mm.
mom's just waiting outside. And they're like, it'll just take a minute. We could really use your help. I was like, okay.
Was it a blue minivan? For some reason, I'm just picturing that.
We had a red minivan.
Red minivan. Oh, so silly.
I wonder
Okay.
if we had a blue one a long time ago. But anyway, I remember putting like
Yeah.
just like a finger up, like, hold on 1 second through the window. I'll be
Mm,
right there. And I helped them put away the mats, and they were very thankful. And then I ran out to the
mm.
car, and I got in the car, and my mom was like, you're grounded. And I was like, what? And she's like, we're sitting here waiting for you, and you're in there fooling around. And I was like, oh no, I wasn't
Mm.
fooling around. They asked me if I could. She's like, that's another day you're grounded.
Yeah.
I was like, no, no, you understand. They asked me to help with the match. And she's like, there's another day. Keep talking back. And I kept trying to explain to her that they just asked me for help and she didn't care. And she just kept grounding me more and more. I was grounded for, I don't know, weeks or something like that for helping, trying to,
Talking
and
back.
talking back
For
and trying to
helping
help.
and then try and explain yourself. Oh,
Exactly,
jeez.
exactly. And this was not a once in a while thing. This is a typical kind of reaction. She could over punish and things like that. Again, that's just one little example. But the truth is, I was often, before this had happened, I had been traumatized by my mother's punitive nature, right? And we talked about this a little before too.
Yeah.
The bullying episode. My mother could be a bully, and bullying is traumatizing too. I got bullied at school. We mentioned that before. That was traumatizing. In fact, for a lot of people, again, we say the word bullying, I think it's abuse, and that kind of abuse there's people out there there's kids out there that take their own lives when things like that happen. Like, it's extremely traumatic. And, when I look back at the things that traumatized me, my mother's death is just one of them, the bullying, and my mother's nature was also traumatic. So it's a lot of cognitive dissonance there.
Yeah. Do you think you seem pretty resilient, I think, from the outside at least. You've got like a real resilience. Do you see yourself that way?
I guess it's all relative, right? I mean,
I guess.
what's an example of not, well, why do you say that?
Well, you just said that the way that people normally deal with these things, or not the way that people normally deal with
It's killing
things.
themselves.
Yeah,
No.
that was the wrong. But I
No.
mean, so you've gone through very clearly multiple very clear traumatic experiences. You were kind of parentified a little bit earlier.
Parentified, interesting. So meaning I had to kind of take on this role of parent sometimes.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, I want to point out, I finally, probably maybe a couple years later, whatever, a few years later, I finally had this talk with my brother, because my brother, I could tell he shifted his resentment towards my mother to me, because I was, whether it made
Mm,
sense or not. So he was rebelling against me instead of my mother, right? Before, he was rebelling against my
yeah.
mother, the stuff he was getting into.
Yeah.
Now he's rebelling against me. And I remember just turning to him and being like, who am I to rebel against? Like, I'm not
Yeah.
worth
Yeah.
rebelling against. I'm not your parent. I don't, I'm
Yeah.
not this figure. I'm like you. I'm growing up. I'm a kid. I'm trying to figure things out. I'm not worth rebelling against.
Yeah.
And I think ever since then, he and I, something shifted. It like clicked,
Huh.
and our relationship got better after that, ever since then.
He probably didn't even realize he was doing
It's
that. It was just
possible. Yeah.
like
I mean, and it's
displaced, like,
possible that I was being a little, like, I remember thinking there was a dirge of discipline in our family, because again, I didn't like how my mother was being, but I also was wondering, like, is it right that we have no rules whatsoever? So I would take it upon myself to be like,
mm,
should you be doing this? Should you be doing that, to my brother? Like, are you sure that's a good
yeah.
idea?
Yeah.
But on my hand, I think I was mentioning this before, I kind of wanted to prove I could still succeed without my mother's punishments and all that stuff, right? And I think in some ways I did. Like, I got good grades at school. I got into university. I didn't need her to be that overbearing, That being said, like I said before, I messed up my sleep and all this other stuff, like going to bed whenever I wanted. So those were my little
Right.
rebellions.
But you wanted to prove that those were not helpful, that those were not the reason
Exactly.
that you were doing well, that you would have done well anyways.
That's what I kind of wanted to prove. And so part of me, in the way that I responded afterwards, you're talking about my resilience or whatever. There's a part of me that
Yeah.
wanted to had something to prove that I could. So again, there's so many,
Mm.
it's a lot deeper, right? Just hearing someone's mom died, you're resilient. Well, everybody's context is a little different, right?
Right.
My context, it's almost like, see, mom,
Yeah. I didn't need you to ground me every week.
I didn't want you to have to die to realize it, but it's a
Yeah.
weird thing to say. But there's a part of me that one of the big wishes I have is I wish she was here so I could so I could confront her about some of this stuff. I've said that
Yeah.
before, maybe. I really wish she could see, I could, because that's a lot of my trauma has to do with dealing with that cognitive dissonance of her punishments, and then losing her, and again, she was the rock of our family. Like I said, she was the parent of the
Yeah.
family. The big joke is that my dad was like another one of the kids. He wasn't, of course. He was the one who My dad was the one, was the bread winner. He was the one who went to work and made money for the
Mm.
family, and he'll remind you of that. He worked
Right.
multiple jobs to do that.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know if I'm resilient. I just, because again, my situation is a little different. And again,
Yeah.
like we said, I'm not an authority on trauma in general, just my own. And I guess we're saying, what is trauma, right? It's like an emotional response to like a terrible situation, right? So yeah, these situations I continue to like pass over. It was a traumatic event that it triggers these memories and feelings. And sometimes, you want to hear something weird? I
Yes.
You're like, yeah, I do.
Always.
Over time, and this is the scary thing, I've forgotten her face a little bit. I've forgotten,
Mm.
in my mind, I'm like, I know what she looks like, but I had forgotten the details, because when you don't see someone it turns out this is a thing.
Yeah.
You haven't seen them for a while, and then and that was really disconcerting to me after some time, that I started to lose that image in my mind. And then one day, I remember I had a dream. I dreamt about her again. I dreamt that I think I had some dream that like she wasn't really dead. She was, the whole time she was faking it. She faked her death or something, and she was really here. And I found her, and she ended up coming back, and we started a relationship again. And she was, we were adults, and everything was better again. I had a dream like this, and but the weird thing about this dream is that her face was so present to me again, and I woke up seeing her face
Mm.
clearly again. So it's not like dreams don't do anything.
Yeah. Sometimes they do something.
Sometimes they can do something.
Yeah. Your unconscious was like, here you go.
Yeah.
I know you forgot this, but you said you wanted to talk to her so you could like confront her, but that's not the only thing you would talk to her about, is it? You don't just want to talk to her, so don't you also want to show her your films or like
Yes, of
talk to
course. I
her
want her
about
to.
what you've done?
Yeah, I'm missing a mother in my life, and that really hits me at times. It hits me more too, because I love my dad and he's wonderful, but there's a certain aspect to him that he's not a very sentimental person. It doesn't come easy to him to say I love you. My mom, it did. She would say I love you all the time. She would
Mm.
again, she had these two sides to her, right? But again, the type of person where I could show her my movie. Then again, I don't know if she would have supported me going into filmmaking. I don't know. I'd like to imagine I still
You never
yeah,
know.
part of
Yeah.
the reason I went into what I went into is my experiences led me here, right?
Mm.
But yeah, I would really love to not just have that conversation with her and confront her. I'd like to have a mother. I'd like to have someone I could show my movies to and ask for advice. And you know in some ways I feel I did grow up missing some of that after that. Again, I was 16, uh and also because my dad checked out, sometimes I felt like I grew up without parents around. In some ways my dad was there physically, but not really emotionally, at the time. So that would have been nice. And yeah, you okay there? I this is a traumatic
Okay.
experience for you. Oh my god. I've traumatized you with my.
No, I
This
can't.
is what happens. I tell people the story,
You're not
and I
traumatizing me.
traumatize them with my story.
You're not traumatizing me. It's hard to hear. I need to pause.
I'm sorry.
I'll be right back. No, don't be. What are you apologizing for? I told you I cry easily.
For the longest time, I felt guilty that I didn't cry that easily at this. I felt like there was something wrong with me because of the way I responded, because of the way I compartmentalized. So
To be honest, I mean, when something's happening to me, I don't know that it's a different response sometimes. Like,
it's true. It's easier to like, it's interesting. My what I didn't bring up during this time is my best friend at the time, Roman. And you want to talk about my resilience? If I have any resilience, it's because I was lucky to have such a great support system, and my best friend, especially, and my friends, right? He was there for me. I could just talk to him about it. He was my therapist.
oh,
And at the time, I didn't realize like it was so good for me. How hard must it have been for him? He just kind of had to be
Right.
there to like, take that, and he's dealing with kind of the trauma of what happened to me. But it's kind of in some ways, it's almost thankless. Like, I'm the victim of this terrible thing that happened to me, and everybody's giving me all this attention and all this stuff. And there's a certain, and yet there's these people who, he was just always there for me. And, that must not have been easy too, to put up with me dealing with it and talking about this for hours on end. And
Like, isn't that what friends are though? Like
I mean, you could
that's
say what they're for, but it's not, it's a choice.
well, no, but like is that I would never like as much as I complain about like, oh, I have to spend time with people too much, like if my friend was going through something and they picked me to be the one that they talked to about it, I'd be like, of course. Like, I don't know.
Maybe that
Yeah.
sounds, to me, it wasn't just a single, he was my best friend. It was every day,
Yeah.
we would, this was,
But you were going through
I went
yeah,
through a
okay.
year of this with years of, he was just so there for me. And to a degree, which was,
Well, that's nice.
he never,
But you can just appreciate it without feeling bad about it,
I think
right?
ultimately, yeah, I just really appreciate it. It was, and
Oh,
it really, I think that's part of the answer. I think that resilience you're talking about, it's not just me. I was able to diffuse my pain and trauma
right.
amongst my friends and support system,
Oh, I see what you're saying.
right? But the truth is, when you diffuse your pain like that, right, they're taking on some of it.
Mm.
What's so funny? As I was talking to you about him, he just like popped
But
up on
did
me, and
Roman
I never see him pop up. I think it's one of these online things. He just game things. He just popped up his name.
uh-oh.
Sorry, you were saying.
Oh, well, like there's a book that's like pretty well known in terms of like trauma, and the author is like kind of the big author for like veteran or soldiers who deal with PTSD, and it's called The Body Keeps the Score: Brain, Mind, and Body in the Healing of Trauma.
Mm,
And it talks about how connection, even though often what is feared is connection or like kind of being open, because that's often where the initial trauma happened, a lot of the time the healing comes from
mm,
human connection
it's true.
and things like that. And so you saying that about Roman just kind of, I thought that might be apt.
It is apt.
I don't
We
know,
talk
man.
about kind of this personal trauma, but there's trauma on even like a grander scale too, right? Like you and I are both Jews. It's been mentioned many times.
Are we?
Yeah, we're Jews. I don't know if you knew this.
What?
Yeah, Jew.
We are Jews. Yeah.
Sometimes I like to tell people, they say, "Are
Uh,
you Jewish?" And I say, "I'm sorry."
Josh.
And I make people deeply uncomfortable for no good reason. Maybe this is part of how I respond to trauma. Anyway, uh,
I mean, to be fair, if they're asking you if you're Jewish and you say I am sorry, that's mostly
maybe
funny. That's like 90% funny,
like being
10%
a dick,
like
making them feel because they're uncomfortable. Like, no, it's totally fine that you're a Jew. Why would you think? Did you think that I? Anyway,
no, it's okay. It's like so again, in Schitt's Creek, there's a point where the guy is like,
you need to watch it.
I know you need to watch the show. The guy's like, well, you know about bagels because you're this is a like a just a guy in the town talking to the main character who's Jewish. He's like, because you're he's like, because I'm Jewish, and he's like, yeah, it feels like a bad thing when I say it out loud. Or something like that. I forget exactly, but it's like it feels like a swear.
It'd be funny
Yeah.
if you said, "You know about bagels?" You're like, "What? Because I'm a Jew?" And be like, "No, because you own a bread shop." Like we. Oh yeah, yeah.
That would
That's
be funny too.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was pretty funny the way it was. Let's not try to fix Schitt's Creek, okay?
You're
It's
right.
pretty perfect.
All right. You know me. I'm always thinking of
Yeah,
it's what I do. Anyway,
it's literally what you do.
I'm sure it's great. I should watch it.
Yeah, you should watch it.
So, what about like generational trauma?
Yeah, I don't know anything about it.
We do though. Like, joking. We're Jews. Our family. Like, I don't know about your family. My grandparents, including my grandmother, who I brought up in this story, was in Auschwitz. She's a
Hmm.
Holocaust survivor. She lost half her family in Auschwitz in the Holocaust. My grandfather as well. This is like there. I always felt like as a people, we've had this like ingrained trauma already,
Yeah.
kind of like rooted in our existence and understanding of the world. And when we're taught things, even
Yeah.
Passover itself is talking about a trauma and enslavement of our people,
Yeah.
this sense of understanding life or death, mortality. Maybe I sometimes wonder if it's like, I don't want to say it's like it's not easier for us, but it's just some
We've practiced a lot.
we had a lot of practice in
A
trauma.
lot
It's
of
like we were it's
practice.
like
It's a
setting up for it.
built-in.
Yeah.
It's like we've got a built-in, or no, not built-in. It's drilled into us young.
Yeah.
Life is hard. You will suffer. You have suffered,
Yeah.
and life sucks. So just
But that, I don't think that's
be
the message.
prepared.
But the
No,
truth
that's
is,
not it.
it's not like, did it help me? Is it like, oh, so I can deal with this like personal trauma that happened to me so easier? Not necessarily, but I mean, not in the moment, but especially afterwards and reflecting on it and putting it into context and the messages that I've gotten growing up. And this is one of the big positives. I feel like I had some good tools
Mm,
of dealing with trauma based on some of the themes I've learned in life and how to
mm,
deal with that. Some of these positive sort of themes, right? Seeing how
yeah,
my not to compare scars or anything, but what I went through was nothing compared to what my grandmother went through in the Holocaust. You know what I mean?
right.
There's she lost her. She was 17, a year older
Oh
than
yeah.
me, and she lost both of her parents
Jeez.
in the camps. That was she used to tell me whenever I talked to my grandmother about this, she had these images and memories of babies being burned alive and like
No,
horrible, horrible
I
things. Like we
can't hear
hardly
this
talk
stuff.
about it, but this is what would come to, it's hard to say, but this is what would come out. That's all that, I'm not saying that's trauma, like this is trauma too, but that is trauma, right? That is really, really difficult.
Yeah.
Even brings up difficult questions too. But I think one of the traumatizing things is you start to question people in life and your faith in things and good and
Yeah,
evil and stuff like that.
for sure. I have to, I think my brain kind of turns off when we talk about this stuff.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, no, it's okay. No, I'm just appalled because I feel like you're carrying the conversation
Oh,
and I'm like trying to engage.
I'm your guest for today, right?
You're the guest, and I'm just like, I can't.
Basically, today I'm the guest and you're the host. We should have said this.
Well, we were trying, but I'm failing as a host. No, it's I'm only able to really, I guess, conceptualize trauma when I read about it in books and things. I'm not very good at handling, real life situations as much, in my opinion. I go to the abstract. So one of the kind of descriptions of how people deal with trauma, so like these defensive structures that people develop. There's a book called Complex PTSD by Pete Walker, and he refers to them as the 4 Fs. So the 4 Fs are fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And the cat, whatever.
Your
Can you hear
categories.
her? My categories. I have an idea of what you are, but what do you think you would be out of fight,
Fight,
flight,
flight,
freeze, or
freeze, or
fawn?
fawn. So this is a general way in which one
These are,
responds to.
yeah. So people initially it's how you would respond in actual dangerous situations, but often it's also after people go through trauma, it's how they respond to what are perceived threats, whether they're actual threats or not. Maybe that's kind of where the triggering happens, but it's not
Right.
necessarily to an actual threat. But when it's perceived as a threat and you kind of go into an emotional flashback, then these are the defensive structures that pop up. So
Right.
someone who fights, usually they'll be aggressive or they'll have like sort of attack mode. Freeze, just like an animal that just freezes and
Yeah.
hopes that you don't see them if they're kind of. And then flight is often
Run
like
away.
a runaway or running. So kind of a running response, because there are different ways of looking at it.
Okay.
And but it's kind of a hype. If I describe it a certain way, it's more of a hyperactivity. I don't know if I want to
Okay.
describe it that way. And then fawn is sort of trying to appease, right? So it's if there's a lion there. So I mean, these are taken from when there's a real threat. Let's say there's a lion or something like that. And it's about to attack you. Are you going to fight it? Are you going to run away? Are you going to freeze and hope it doesn't see you? Or are you going to fawn, like try to get it to be your friend, or try to, oh, I'm just, you know, here to pet you, try to pet it in a certain way. Then I don't know.
Hmm.
That's the fun.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. You know what? So what am I?
What are
What
you? I have an idea, but
I have to think about this.
you have to
I
think.
have to.
Do you think you need like a week to think about it, or
You know what? This is actually. How long have we been talking now?
probably long enough?
Let's. Why don't we wrap this episode up and we'll continue we'll continue this because this is a big topic.
Yeah, I think
We'll continue it in a part two.
that's a good idea. Yeah. So stick around for part 2.
Cliffhanger.
Find out which of the 4 Fs is Josh.
Find out. Yeah.
Find out next week on the next episode.
Well, when you ask that question, still, which of the 4 Fs is Josh? It just sounds so like
It's,
right. It sounds. It's just my gutter mind. Okay.
I mean, which of the 4 Fs? I guess now it's starting to seem like I should
Now
feel
I'm gonna
like
make you think that every time. I'm sorry.
yeah,
Trying to get into something.
you're like guiding my mind towards a gutter, and
Mhm.
it wasn't even there initially. But
Okay, well, look. So part one, basically, I've been your guest here, basically talking about
yeah,
my mother's death and all this stuff, and how some of my personal trauma here, and I'm
yeah.
sure. I mean, for a part two, I have a whole other story too. So,
Oh, good.
um,
Okay, good. I look forward to hearing more horrific things that have happened to you. Okay, great.
yeah,
Yeah,
they're great. If you want to hear horrible things that have happened to me, I can just go on. And no,
yeah. Please,
to
yeah.
be clear, it's not just the point to tell horrible things, but to give
No.
that's the best I can do is give you my personal story and examples and
Yeah.
how I deal with that. And
I mean, this is the best way for us to understand each other, right? Is to know
yeah,
what someone else's experience really is, right?
do you feel closer now? Are we bonding, Aya?
I wouldn't go that far, but
No, it's not
no,
traumatic. Okay,
I
maybe
can't.
part two. After part two, you're definitely gonna feel bonded.
Yeah, I mean, you only brought me to tears, but
Good. I like making people cry. So, no, I don't.
except
I
you didn't.
really.
Do you know what you did? You apologized, which is
Oh no.
craziness. Don't apologize to me for me having a reaction. It's not, you're not responsible.
I kind of am
No,
responsible though.
I asked you these questions. I said, let's talk about this. So, yeah. Anyways,
I just want to say sometimes it is hard for me when I'm telling these stories. I don't always know how it's coming off either. Like I'm,
but it's not your job to worry about that.
it's easy. I sometimes get into the details and talking about it, and there's a certain trauma in it for me, but there is for you hearing it for the first time. So
Honestly, thank you for sharing all that stuff because I mean, that is so personal. And I think it's difficult to share that kind of thing. I mean, whether you found it difficult or not, I think it can be definitely very difficult to share that with who knows how many people. So yeah, thanks, Josh. And don't worry about making me cry. Happens. I'm
well,
an easy crier, as we've talked about. I can't watch other people say things like, what did you say? There was a line that you said that just kind of hit me, but yeah.
oh well, that's
So don't.
I'll
It's the power of your ability to tell a story.
oh,
It's a
there
good
we
thing,
go. It's
right?
just my
There you
storytelling.
go.
I'm just good.
It's
I'm
just your storytelling ability.
manipulative storytelling ability.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, you know what? Yeah, let's wrap up this part, and I'll see if I
And
can do it
we'll,
all over again in part two,
yeah.
since apparently I'm the only one with traumatic experiences to share.
Yep.
We'll see. But okay,
Yeah.
yeah. So should we do that thing? Let's do that thing real
Yeah.
quick.
Let's do that thing. Well, thanks for listening to another episode of Adulthood Friends. If you like us, if you're enjoying the episodes, please subscribe, follow us on Facebook. We have a Facebook page, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts,
Spotify.
Spotify, anything, everywhere. That's where we are. So, yeah.
Yeah.
And how should we end this thing?
I don't know. I think I'm just kind of like talking, and then the music sort of.
Beep boop 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 beep boop 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 beep boop beep boop 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 beep boop 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 boop